fitting to this is the next talk. It's we already spoke about versioning and versions of Silverstripe and versions of PHP, and Tim Burt is showing us a way to do this in a more streamlined way, I think.
Time to replace all this artificial intelligence with some human stupidity. So, hello, welcome everybody. We've had a good day today, obviously. My name, some of you will know me, my name's Tim. I am often found around the community forum and the Slack channels, talking nonsense mostly. I'm UK based, obviously, and I work for a company called BiffBangPow. And we are a development agency working probably 95%, if not more, of our stuff is done in Silverstripe, with a few legacy products there. We also maintain a number of open source modules, which some of you may have seen, some of you may have used. It's working at BBP that has led to this today. So really what we've got is a bit of a show and tell. You probably won't learn very much, but it's a bit of a show and tell of a problem that we've had and how we have approached solving that. So the question is, what is the problem? And the answer to that is, for any given website, what version is it running? And not just what version of Silverstripe, but what version of everything. And a couple of years ago, in an Italian restaurant, over a few beers with somebody who's in this room, I don't know where he's gone now, we had a conversation of, wouldn't it be really good if Silverstripe could do this? And that noodled around for a while, and after a few years and a few more beers, we came up with the conclusion that actually we could make it do that. We could make it do what we wanted it to do. And the what version of the site is running comes out of the things we've talked about today. We heard from Silverstripe earlier about their new release patterns, that at any given moment, you could be within a minor version update, or you may have had 2 or 3 security patches that you actually didn't even realize had appeared. So the upgrade frequency coming out of Silverstripe can make it difficult to keep track of what's going on across your site portfolio. Within our business, we have different levels of support contract for different clients. So some clients will get patches and updates every single month. That's what they pay for. That's our job. We make sure everything is bang up to date all the time. Other clients don't have that level of support. So if you've got a client who only gets that level of support 3 months, or only agrees to have that level of support every 3 months, and you've got releases coming out all the time, suddenly everything starts to fly apart fairly quickly. Not only is the frequency of updates a problem, but the variety of packages that we use is a problem. So even on the most basic level, we'll have a website which is just pure CMS, pure Silverstripe, CMS4, CMS5, whatever it may be. The next one that comes along will have Fluent installed. The next one may have Elemental installed. And then there are all the submodules. It may have user forms. It may have all of these different packages, and every single website that we put out of the door has probably got a slightly different configuration, a slightly different feature set. And the biggest problem of all that we always get are the clients themselves, because you don't need me to tell you how difficult clients can be to convince sometimes. You need to spend some money to update your website, or something has happened, and that's why we're talking to you right now, because you need to update your website. So all of these things are what fed into this particular conversation. So we started off with a set of basic module requirements. We wanted something that would display information in the CMS, so that you didn't need to go digging around in some file or in some repository. You just want something that anybody who's got CMS access can look at and see exactly what they want to see. It should be succinct in useful blocks of data. And from a code point of view, we wanted to make it as modular as possible, as simple as we possibly could. And the final result that we wanted to end up with was just a little system status page that appeared in the CMS that would let you go into the CMS and see at a glance everything that you need to know about that website. Now, it comes back to the question, what do we want to know and what can we discover easily? Well, the main things we want to know, as I said before, are the versions of the software that's installed. We also want to know things about the system and possibly about the configuration. And, as is so often the case, Silverstripe Core already contains the tools to let us do this. There's a class in there called Version Provider, and every single one of you will have seen the output of Version Provider because it is this right here. This CMS version is pulled straight out of the Version Provider class. And what it does, really, really simply, you probably can't see the code, but it's all in the core. This just reads the composer lock file that's in the project, it passes it, and it spits out a really nice array of all the packages that are installed on that platform. So we didn't need to do very much work at all to get basic functionality. The minimum product that we wanted to do was already available to us. So we set out to modularize this, to actually put it in as a proper Silverstripe add-on. And we set about that in a couple of ways. We wanted to use a very simple PHP interface so that we knew that any module that was in this reporting system would have a certain feature set. So we could know we could always call on something within that module. And we just have a PHP trait as well to implement a couple of those methods by default. And the beauty of this, again, because in Silverstripe there's also the class info class. If you've never seen it, it's in there, which that can tell us straight away, tell me all of the PHP classes that implement this. So it means we've built in instant discovery of all the monitoring modules that we want to put in there. So if there's a third party that wants to come along and add something, it's great. All you've got to do, implement the interface, and use the trait if you want, and straight away it will get included in our status page. So it makes it very pluggable, very extensible, and that's exactly what we wanted so that we don't have to keep reissuing code all the way through. As part of the base module, we have this. This is the core package version. So this is what we consider to be the core products that we need to keep an eye on for any given project. And in here, it's just described with a YAML config, and you can put in there whatever you like, what these things are going to be. So we've got framework, CMS, elemental, and the actual client software itself. And all that does, again, it literally just uses the version provider class that we saw earlier on. And in the CMS, that's what you get. You get a very simple, got a pointer, you get a very simple, doesn't work, very simple monitoring client there, elemental, and it shows you all of the versions at a glance of what you've actually got to do. There's a similar one which literally just shows every single package that's installed in Composer. So once again, exactly the same thing. All of this code is in the repository, by the way, if anyone wants to look at it. So all this does is in the result method, pulls out all of the data that version provider gives, and just gives us a complete list of every Composer package that's installed on the system. So again, immediately at a glance, you've just got a collapsible list of all the stuff that's there. You can have a look at the site and see what makes it tick. This next one, again, one of the 4 base modules that we've got in the system. This is the Silverstripe configuration. And as you can probably imagine, it's all fairly straightforward. We get the site name, the environment type, whether it's in live or dev mode, base URL, as the system thinks it is, and whether default admin credentials have been set in the environment. So again, it's a useful thing, because you don't really want that in production, to see that you've got a live site with no admin default credentials in there. So as a checklist for us when we're going live, we can look at this and just make sure that everything, and it doesn't need a developer to look at it. It needs anyone with CMS access to look at this, and they can sign off that actually that part of the system is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And finally, just some fairly straightforward system configuration. And again, the code that produces it is nothing clever. We're not doing anything groundbreaking here. We're pulling out PHP ini variables, things like that. And we can get the PHP version, the IP address on the actual machine itself, memory limit, upload limit, all of those kind of things that you may want to know and that may be helpful when you're debugging a problem or something's not gone right. You can actually just look straight away and go, oh, it's not a memory problem because I've got a gigabyte of memory on my PHP process. There's a little extension on this one as well. This one can show environment variables. So if you wanted to expose any environment variables that you've got set, in this case, I've just as an example got the SMTP username and password. So you can see what Silverstripe believes those are set to, and that will pull them out into a separate box in the bottom of the system configuration. So you just throw the YAML file at it, and away it goes. And what you end up with is a really nice screen full of nice information that you can look at all the time. This just appears in the settings screen of a standard CMS installation. So this pops up. These are all just collapsible panels. Again, nothing really clever, but really, really useful, helpful information. The problem is, it doesn't solve our problem. Because our problem is, it's all well and good having that nice screen to look at, and you log in, and you can see what things are set to, but we, at any given time, may be managing 120, 150 plus websites that we have to actively maintain, we have to actively work on. So that's not all of them, by the way. The next step we decided was to add a centralized dashboard that we could actually use to try and monitor in one place what was happening across our entire portfolio of managed, maintained websites. And that's where the bulk of the work actually ended up. Most of what I've done already is really easy. It's not very clever. So just to annoy the people who love naming things, I've called this a server. This is the monitoring server, and the others are monitoring clients. If you don't like that terminology, I don't care. Right, so I'm just being clear. It's not a problem. So the monitoring server, that's the dashboard. That's the bit that actually will show all of the data from everything. And again, simple set of requirements. We need to get that data from the client machines. We need to report any failures and show any warnings or status reports that we may want to show. So here, again, all of the code's in our GitHub. It's all open source, so feel free to play with it. It brought us to the first question of the whole situation. There's two ways we could do this. There's two models we could adopt. One was to have the client machines push their data to the server. So they could periodically say, here you go, here's some information for you. This is what you need to know. Or we could have the central machine going off and polling all the clients and saying, hey, tell me what's up. And it really came down to a couple of simple choices. With the push model, we felt it was more secure. The conversation is initiated by the client machine. It sends its data. That's the end of it. It does have some downsides, though, because with the pull model, we actually end up with simpler deployments. You don't have to set up a new website and then set up a cron job or a cron task. It may be running in Docker. It may be running on Windows. It may be running on Azure. You don't know where it's running. So setting up and managing scheduled tasks on all of those clients could be a problem. It also means we can update the frequency of reporting much more easily. If the server machine has to go and ask the clients, we've only got to change that time in one place. If we say, I want you to do that every 6 hours or every 3 hours or every 2 minutes, we can do that if we want to. Whereas if we suddenly decided we needed to change the reporting frequency on 150 websites, that suddenly becomes a big problem to solve. And also, the other thing that sort of fell out of this is that it allows us to do some basic uptime monitoring. If we poll these clients every 5 minutes, and it's a simple HTTP request, if that client doesn't respond, we know something's wrong. A network problem, could be the site's down, could be a database fault, but we know something's wrong, usually before the client does. And it means that we can replace some of the services that we pay for currently in terms of monitoring and uptime management with our own system that's doing some basic polling. And we can certainly downgrade the monitoring stuff that we have to run. And the point is, this isn't an external system. We haven't got another screen with another account with another system that we've got to manage. So we ended up going down the pull route. That meant we had to go back to the client code again, and we had to put some mechanisms in there to allow the server machine to get that data. So when the client module is installed, it creates custom route on that machine to obtain the data. The data is all supplied in a common format, so it's just a JSON encoded array with the ID of the module, be it the core packages or the all packages module, and then the data that it wants to send. And all the client modules that are there that implement this interface are included by default. So everything has got a common pattern and everything works really nicely. Now, I know some of you are already thinking it because I saw your faces just now. Security obviously is a problem. We don't want to start exposing all this system information about all of our machines just to anybody who cares to find the endpoint. So we looked at security and took the view that if we can make it sufficiently difficult to gain this information, then, which is basically the underlying principle of most security, if you can make it more difficult than the value of what you get as a result, then you've probably got security sorted out. Nothing is secure. So we may have gone a little over the top. We may not have done. Depends on your point of view. So the first thing, the client endpoint, so when you create this endpoint, it's got IP limiting on it. So you can say, only allow requests to this endpoint from this IP, or this IP range. Now, the way our hosting is configured is that actually all of our instances, our web instances, are connected in a private network. They're in a VPC. So we can actually say nothing from outside that VPC is allowed to access this endpoint. So for a start, we're not exposing it to the wider internet, which is a really important first step. Equally, if you haven't got that set up, obviously you can say, I'm only going to accept traffic from this particular IP address where the server happens to be running. Each client has a unique API key, which is pre-shared with the server. So when a request comes into the client and says, hey, give me all your data, if it isn't accompanied with the API key for that machine, it's ignored. Literally, it just 404s the request as if it doesn't exist. And obviously, the server knows what that is, just in case it didn't need saying. Everything happens over HTTPS. Every client has a unique ID assigned to it. Not so much security, but more a bit of validation. So when the server sends a request, and the client says, oh, okay, yeah, that's valid, I'll send you some data, it also sends a UID back with it, so that the server can go, ah, yeah, that's a valid response from that machine. So there's just a bit of a checksum on the data coming back so that it can't be spoofed, it can't be mucked about with. And most importantly, all the data that's sent from the client to the server is encrypted. And I mean encrypted, not encoded. It's encrypted. We use the Sodium package. Every client has a unique encryption key and a salt, and every request has a nonce as well, so that you can't replay them. It means it becomes incredibly difficult to start cracking this data. There are much, much easier ways to get the PHP version of a server than sitting there trying to break symmetric encryption. So those are the primary ways that we manage the security of the conversation. And again, it was our view that this is sufficient for this use case. If you disagree with that, that's great, don't use it. Because that's what it comes down to. We felt that this was sufficient. At the server end, all the client configuration is also encrypted in the database. So when client is configured on the server, the actual data for that is encrypted in the MySQL database. So if you lose your database, again, somebody's got to break that encryption in order to find out what your clients are and start querying them, and then break that encryption to be able to find out what Silverstripe version you're running. They could just look in the meta tag. Also, the incoming client data is stored in the database. The last report is stored in the database, and that is just stored in its encrypted format as it comes in, and is only decoded using the unique encryption key at runtime. So it exists in plain text in memory whilst it's being displayed on the screen, and that's it. It's not stored anywhere. So as far as we were concerned, we felt this was a pretty robust way to manage those security concerns. If we've missed something glaring, I will happily hear from you. And the main dashboard, this is what the main dashboard ended up looking like. It's just a fairly simple grid field. List of sites, list of the base URLs, the client ID for each one, which I've obviously blurred out, whether they're currently active, the last communication that came from that machine, and then just a simple traffic light system at the end. Green means everything's okay. Red means something has gone wrong with the communication. I can't get hold of this machine. Yellow is just a communication hasn't started yet. I haven't done my first call to this machine. So we've now got an at-a-glance uptime screen, basically. That's what we were talking about earlier on. And you'll see a couple of these in the list here have got a little warning triangle next to them. And the warnings are where actually the real benefit of this whole system starts to come into play. So in the same way that every piece of client code, so every module within the client software, core packages, the system configuration, there is an interface for that, and there's a trait, and every single one of those is in the client. There is a corresponding interface on the server and a corresponding reporting module on the server. So if you've got a core packages module on the client, there's a core packages module on the server. And that can be set up to tell you things that you need to know. So again, as I said, we've got a really simple interface here, which has got a couple of important methods, get report and get warnings, and you can implement whatever you want within those. And here are a couple of examples of the configuration for each of the core modules. So this one is the Silverstripe configuration. And this says here, issue a warning if the required environment isn't set to live, or issue a warning if the default admin exists. So when this module runs on the server, it reads the data from the client machine and says, oh, I've got to throw a warning if it's not in live mode. And that's what it does. And then here's the system info. So I'm saying here, I want my minimum PHP version to be set at 8.1, and I want my minimum memory limit to be set at 128 meg. So again, if I deploy a machine and do something wrong on the server config, or it's a server that I don't have control over, I can straight away see, oh, I'm likely to run into image processing problems because I've only got 64 meg of memory. And again, here is the core packages. And core packages are where we tackle the big question of upgrading and keeping track of where all of these pieces of software are. So in here, this is the core packages. And there's a few warnings in here. We've got a warning if dev packages exist in Composer because that's a bad idea. We don't want dev master packages in our Composer file. And then we've got the minimum versions. So the minimum version of Silverstripe CMS has to be either 5.0 or 4.13. So we support a syntax which lets us span across major releases as well. And the same with framework, and then a requirements module that we want to make sure are always up to the latest code. So when we know Silverstripe has released a patch or a minor version, all we do is we go into the server and we change this requirement here in the config. We run a dev build, and we immediately see every single website that no longer matches the requirements that we've set down. So if there's a patch version or a minor version, we say, we need to fix this. We can look at our list of packages and our list of sites that we're managing and say, right, here are all the sites that need our attention. And when you click into one of those, this is just one I made up, but if you click into one of these, this one here has got a list of warnings present before anything else, and it says that CMS is below the required version, HB is below the required version, there's dev packages in the code, the default admin credentials are set, the site's in dev mode, everything you could possibly do wrong, we've done wrong on this website. So that's what happens when you actually click in to one of those sites on the list. You get a really simple view of what's happening on that package. And the reason that's so useful to us is that if we have clients who are on a service contract, on a support contract, and we know there's been a patch or we know there's been an update, we can instantly see these guys are top priority. We need to get to those first because not only are they out of date, but they also have a monthly support contract. Or if somebody's been in and changed something on a site, we can see straight away, oh, they left it in dev mode. So it allows us to get ahead of potential problems, but it also allows us to be much more proactive with dealing with our clients. It also produces, part of the reason for putting it in the CMS, I should just add, is because we didn't want you to have to go through a repository or a CI pipeline or something just to see which websites need upgrading. Because it means that our client support people can log into this, look at the list and say, oh, these guys aren't on a support contract at all, but their site's out of date. So now I've got a reason to call them. Now I've got a sales lead, now I've got a support lead, and now I've got a conversation I can have with a client, and that inevitably brings in more business because it's not a cold call. Clients hate being called. But if you're calling them to say, hey, we've got this thing that needs to be updated, there's been this big security risk, you probably heard about it on the news, and we're ahead of that, we're on top of it for you. So not only does it help our technical side, it also helps client relations, and it helps with our overall profile of being on top of the technical issues. To add a client, this one's really just for information, so this is how you add a client, and you give it a name, the base URL, you can activate it or not, and when you first add the client, the server generates all of the security information you're going to need. So here we've got the encryption secret, the salt, the API key, and the UID for this client. It gets shown once when the thing is created. If you don't write it down, you can't get it back. So it's, again, we try to keep it as secure as possible. And the idea is you just copy and paste that into the environment on your client machine, and everything comes to life. So you can install the client software, and the endpoint won't work. There's no security risk from just installing the client software. So if all you want is a nice status page on the website, great, you can do that. As soon as you add it to the monitoring server and paste this stuff into the environment, it then starts to become alive. It will be included in the reporting system, and you can see exactly what's what on the main dashboard. As part of the general monitoring server, the general monitoring system, it's got a little bit of reporting. As I said earlier, client connection failures will show up in red so that you can instantly see, oh, there's a problem with the site. Could be nothing, could be everything. Any errors are logged in the standard Silverstripe logging system. So it just uses the normal logging interfaces. You can review them and see exactly what you want to see. So if there's a client failure, if there's a response that comes in with the wrong ID, gets logged. Everything gets logged that actually something's gone wrong. And we also have got a Slack webhook interface in there as well. Again, all just through the standard PSR logger, so that if you give it a Slack webhook in your server environment, it will post errors about the sites in real time. So as an uptime tool, again, we find this really, really useful. We can see straight away, oh, this site, for some reason, isn't responding to its monitoring requests. And that's mostly it. A few things that I just want to say. We are still, please read this because I don't want to be sued. The code is still in development. We're still working on it. There's a few things that we need to implement. One is the IP limiting. We need to merge that into the actual code because we've got it working in development, but it's not on the repo at the moment. We've also added some rate limiting in using the standard Silverstripe rate limiting models on the client endpoints, just to, again, stop people trying to spam them if they happen to find the endpoint. And we've also got some configuration options so that on a per client basis, you can set the polling frequency. So if you've got particular clients that you want to use for uptime monitoring, you could set them to a minute. But other clients that you just want to have an eye on, you can set those to every day, every week, whatever it may be. So there's plenty of work still to be done. We would love to see some other people adding modules in. If there's anything useful that you think should be monitored, should appear on the status page, we've tried to make it as open as possible in terms of the structure. We've still got to write the readmes. I've still got to write the readmes. So there's still a bit of work to do. This will obviously all be in the recording, but we've got our website, the client and server software repositories, the Sodium library, if you fancy doing a bit of reading about how that security works and how secure it is, and my GitHub page is at the bottom there as well. And the only thing really left is to say thank you. And that's me, short and sweet. I'll let you get your coffees because it's nearly time for a break.
Hello? Okay. So thank you, Tim, for this very interesting talk. Are there any questions left from you? Yeah?
Hey, thanks for this. One question, have you considered incorporating the output of the composer outdated command in that monitoring reports? Because this way, you know, to see if there are like updates available for certain packages. Is this something you would consider?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure where we'd run it. We probably, the difficulty is obviously every site's got a different composer file, so we'd have to, I guess, run it on the client machines. And it would have to be done on demand because we can't run it. I like the idea of running of upgradable just to see what's there. It's something to think about how we might be able to sort of best achieve that for sure.
Just one question. Does client support Silverstripe 3?
No, is the short answer. Well, you could probably make it work on Silverstripe 3. There's nothing too clever in there. I'm not sure the scope of things like the class info and the version provider, which obviously the client software relies fairly heavy on. So I don't know is the honest answer. I'm sure it could be, at least some of it could be made to work. The client software isn't clever. It's fairly obvious and fairly straightforward and uses a lot of standard PHP stuff.
At least it's another reason to upgrade. So, James?
You mentioned you've got different clients on different support contracts. How does the system currently allow you to see which support contract they're on? So can it group the ones that are on monthly ones?
It doesn't directly, no. We've deliberately limited the scope of this to making it what we didn't want to do is bake anything into this that is specific to us. So we do have other systems that do that, and they do link into this, but this doesn't do that. So that was the point. That we want this to be an open source project that we would love to see, you know, as part of every site that we build, and hopefully that some other people build and contribute to.
Have you considered websites that run different PHP versions or composer packages? Because from what I've seen, the warnings appear of you define a set version.
Yeah.
And that's for everything. Have you considered multiple websites with different requirements regarding those?
Yeah, I see what you're. So you're saying that a particular website should have a particular version. It's not something which we've thought about. No. Certainly for the use case that we saw, it was important that everything was up to date. So we haven't got currently the ability to say this website has a different set of rules to all the others. Certainly, it's certainly worth thinking about. I mean, what happens with things like the core software? You can put in, it quietly fails. So if Elemental's not on a site, it just ignores that line in the config. So for us, that seemed like enough. It may be wrong. It may be proven that actually we do need to have a per site configuration. And if that's the case, then obviously we can revisit that.
Any questions left right now?
Have you considered having this system force like the client to run some kind of job or something?
That was part of our initial thinking as to whether the client should actually do something. But again, what we wanted to try and get away from was having to do two things, really. One, having to insist on a particular client configuration. So the server must have these things. So the idea of this is that you could put it on any Silverstripe installation, from shared hosting to a bare metal to a cloud solution, that there's no underlying requirements for what the client must be capable of doing. So that was part of the rationale for not having the clients report in, or not having the clients run specific jobs that needed to do specific tasks. Again, that may change. This is fairly new in terms of early in its development. So if we find there are reasons that the client needs to do some pre-processing or some particular information gathering or whatever it may be, we can go back and look at that. I think for the basic functionality where we are now, there's no reason for that. But the point is that if, let's say there was something, if you say, well, I've got an application where the client needs to do something and report that data in, you can do that. If you've got a particular environment where the client needs to create a sales report or do something, as long as you implement the client interface and make a reporting module for the other end, it will just get picked up and included as part of the system. So we've tried to keep it as vanilla as possible so that it's not being tied to any specific requirement.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay, so we're pretty good in time. Now it's 4 o'clock and we have a 15-minute coffee break. We still have some coffee left and some hot water for tea. So yeah, feel free to grab another cup.